Hello, Tom.
Hello, how you doing?
Very well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm very well, stuck in London, but there we are. Probably several weeks away from being outside and then pretty much on the water. Yeah, we'll be launched and then we can go off and start having some adventures, which has been 5 years in the making, so it's very exciting.
It's been a very long time coming, hasn't it?
Certainly has. I mean, my first ever taste of sailing, I think I was about 18 and went on a kind of week or 2 week long sailing holiday with a friend of mine, with his parents. We had a great time doing that, and I thought it was awesome. And then did absolutely nothing about it for quite some time. But then about 6 or 7 years ago, I started to think about it a little bit more. I'd been in the army, I got injured, I was now out of the army, and I'd always had this kind of desire to go off and sail around the world. And so I started thinking about it more and more, and I started doing some research, and I came across Impossible Dream, which is fully accessible 60-foot catamaran. And then I kind of looked at who had designed it, who had built it. In the meantime, I've been off and done a bit of sailing on a tall ship, which is fantastic. Discovered that wheelchairs weren't completely incompatible with sailing boats, but trying to be as stable as possible was a good idea. So that really kind of pushed me in the catamaran direction. And I got in touch with you guys, as you know, and we just started having a conversation about it. And at the same time, I'm kind of watching all of the SV Delos or Sailing Uma type YouTube channels, really kind of getting into this idea of spending a lot of time on the water sailing around the world. But obviously then we had to work out how to make it happen from an accessibility point of view, because it's just not possible to buy a wheelchair accessible boat off the shelf. Nobody makes them. So if you want one, you have to find someone to design it and to build it for you. And exactly what we found with Dazcat and Multimarine. So those conversations started happening back in 2015, I think. And we've been through a number of kind of design iterations, been through a whole process, and many years later, we're now weeks away from having Artemis in the water and about to actually go off and do all of that adventuring that I've been dreaming about since I was about 18.
You've been obviously quite heavily involved in the design process, haven't you? How's that worked?
Well, I think for anyone who has any kind of accessibility requirements, clearly they are going to be unique to that person largely. I mean, not all people who use a wheelchair in the same way, for example. So quite rightly, therefore, I've sat down with Darren and Simon, and we talked about what it is that I needed from it, and we built the design around that. So I've necessarily been quite involved in it because they need to be able to ask me the right questions and get the right information so that the design reflects what it is that I need to be able to go sailing safely and enjoyably.
They do that to a certain extent with all customers because everybody's unique and individual. Obviously more so if you're in a wheelchair, but I know that you've also come with some of your own criteria for things because of how you would like to be able to use the boat as well.
I mean, the idea is that what we've built is a kind of fully expeditionary. It's a sailing yacht, but it's also a diving platform. I do a lot of diving. I'm a diving instructor. I really enjoy lots of technical diving. So we've built this so that I can take it to places that are not necessarily readily accessible to anybody. And we can be there and we can go diving and go exploring on the water, but under the water as well. So, part of the design brief was, can we put a compressor in? Where's that going to go? Obviously, they're fairly hefty things.
Can I interrupt? How did that go down with Simon and Darren? Because customers have told me in the past they've had to argue with them about aspects, especially ones that are going to weigh their boat down a little bit.
Yeah, well, let's just say we've got the smallest compressor we could get away with, and it had to be near the middle, so the weight was less. But obviously there are diving cylinders too, so there's a compromise there on where they're stored and how much they weigh. So you know, everything has been driven by, you know, necessary kind of design compromise, which is exactly the way you'd expect it to be.
To try and make this manageable, the whole drawer thing, that's fixed. That's where that was going to be fixed. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to get to that, but can we imagine anything that could be a useful space for? Does it want to have a sort of a fiddle on it, and that's where someone
Let's do that.
jumps over there and gets to whatever might be there?
Yeah.
The chili plant, I don't know.
Let's have something.
And when this area is a little bit more unique for a first of our Dazcats, and it's the garden, isn't it?
It is.
This area here is going to be broken up into 3 sections here, and basically we're going to put in a couple of lamps which are solar powered there. We obviously got the window here, and we're going to fill this with herbs and lettuce and fresh crunchy veg.
There you go. No scurvy.
No scurvy.
I found with long distance voyages, you know, eventually after a week, your fresh veg that you've taken is gone, and you're down to sort of curries and cans and packet food, and you kind of miss that lovely freshness of a bit of salad or some herbs sprinkled on your potatoes. And so this is our first Mark 1 sort of garden afloat.
Big space.
Yeah. One of the design ideas we had was to basically deck over the entire hull right out to the outboard side to maximise the footprint for accessibility. Then we can actually drop a lot of the systems and fuel tanks. We've got slightly larger fuel tanks than they would normally fit on our Dazcats because we want a long range. So we've got our engine installation, and the engine's kind of a mid engine, so it's all about comfort of ride again. So we try to still squeeze as much stuff to the middle of the boat as we can to smooth it out. Once all that's in and the fuel tank's in, we can then just.
The other thing that I had to tell them was that I've got a something called a terrain hopper, which is like an off-road wheelchair, really, for or mobility scooter. It's a fantastic piece of kit. It's 4-wheel drive. It's got a motor in each wheel. Goes anywhere, and I wanted to take it with me because there's no point, sailing up to a beautiful island in the middle of the Pacific, but not actually be able to go onto it. So, firstly, we had to work out, well, how do we get this thing on? It weighs a couple of 100 kilos. That's quite a lot of weight to be there. So we had to work out where it would, how it would fit on, where we would store it. All of these little design challenges were there in the design brief, and we've worked it out. But then, of course, we also have to work out, well, how do we get from Artemis onto shore through, on a beach or on a pontoon or, some other kind of jetty or on a slipway, how do we do that? So we've had to think quite carefully about the access pathway, if you like, from the shore to boat, as well as being on the boat and moving around the boat and being able to sail the boat. How do we get on and off it? How do I provision the boat if I need to get the boat onto the shore and get stuff onto it? So all of these things have been fed into this design process, and I think we've got a workable solution. I guess we'll find out. If be nice and self-sufficient, we've plastered it in solar panels, so we're generating our own power. We've got plenty of storage space. It's got a freezer, it's got a fridge. I recently invested a fair amount of money in some mackerel fishing kit, which hopefully will be the best £7.99 I've ever spent.
I'm sure it will.
The aspiration is that we're going to be, cruising wherever we want to be, as self-sufficient as possible. And when we get to places, we're able to do interesting things there, be it diving, be it exploring on the shore, on land, in the water, on the water, whatever that may be.
Have you got places planned out that you want to visit?
Yeah, everywhere.
Good for you.
Well, I think so. COVID permitting, once we're in the water, I'll be able to come down and we'll do some sea trials, and I'll literally learn the ropes. So we'll go through that kind of learning process. I think then if we can, we will sail up to the west coast of Scotland and probably base ourselves there for a couple of months over the summer, so that we can do lots of sailing training, but also there's some brilliant diving up there. They're very interested to work out what I was talking about before in terms of, in any particular situation, how do we get off the boat? How do we get on the boat? How do we get onto a jetty? How do we get onto a pontoon? How do we get onto whatever that might be? So that we've worked it all out. So when we kind of come across this at other points in the future, then we can say, okay, well that's that particular solution. So we'll just put that into place. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do that over the summer, and then I think we're trying to see if we can get across to Iceland. We'll do that, and then I guess we'll back and then see if we need to kind of test and adjust anything in the yard, and then the aspiration is that we head south and try and get across the Atlantic at the end of the year.
So in terms of sailing the boat, it's got quite a different rig and setup and layout. How do you anticipate that's going to work?
Well, we've gone for simplicity, the idea being that in extremis, it can be sailed by one person and by me from a chair. Therefore, we decided that we would do away with the mainsail, we'd do away with the boom. We'll take that, that piece of equipment out of the equation. We've moved the mast back. So power will come from slightly larger sails at the front. It's all kind of sheeted back to big rewinded winches at the rear of the boat. So they're controlled by push buttons. So it's all fairly easy to do, and it can be controlled from the helm station as well. So you can adjust things whilst you're there inside under cover. But the overarching idea really is to make it as simple as possible. So there are a few things to go wrong. It would be quite hard for me to be able to get up and try and sort out any issues with a more complicated rig. So we've kept it as super simple as we possibly can, so that hopefully it won't break and it's easy to use. Certainly the plan is to have crew. I've got a very good friend of mine, Stevie, who will be coming along as certainly at the beginning as the person who actually knows how to sail properly. So I have a fairly steep learning curve to traverse here. And then I think what would be fantastic if people, friends, family, etc., want to come on for a week here, a week there. It would be great if people just kind of turn up and we'll go and do some fun stuff. Yeah, just
come and join in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A couple of bunks and a doubles, so it's very much sort of a explorer sort of adventure wagon, isn't it, in that sense?
That's the whole idea.
Yeah, like if you have friends to come diving with you, then they have a room to stay in.
Yeah, so I think, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you had 2 here, potentially 10 people with a squeeze.
Yeah.
Be a squeeze.
Yeah, it'd be a big squeeze, 10, but you've got another accessible berth.
So the various lockdowns have been the opportunity to get things like the Yachtmaster done. I've done a couple of radio courses to get all the right licenses. So I mean, I've done the kind of short range maritime one, but I've also started working my way through some of the amateur radio ones as well, because there might be some interesting opportunities to play around with that whilst the ocean, which would be quite fun. Just trying to kind of get those things done while I got the opportunity to do them, and then obviously we're looking to put it into practice in less than a month now.
Yeah, really can't wait. Those sailing type qualifications that you're doing at the moment, they're on top of a huge long list of other accolades that you have to your name. Here you have a defence fellowship from Oxford, a master's.
So it's an MPhil, Master of Philosophy. Right. It's in it's in history, but it's about humanitarian intervention and using force to do it. But actually, that then led into what's probably next on your list, which is a PhD. It's all of those things are kind of continuations of the other. You're
also a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society. So, are you planning any particular projects in relation to that at all? Is there any aspect that you're interested in specifically?
I mean, I don't have anything formally planned with them, although I'm quite interested in the citizen science side of things. So that I and lots of other people have what is effectively a floating data collection point. You know, I think it'd be really good to kind of feed the data back to whomever needs it in whatever way they need. So I'm certainly going to be looking into trying getting involved with some of that. I must say though, I'm very interested in the oceanography side of things. I did a short course on it once, which was fascinating. But I'm incredibly interested in, in the world's oceans, the way that we treat them and the way that we look after them or don't look after them. I've certainly got a bit of an eye on that, so we'll see how it develops.
And that links in very much with the diving as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can see change. I know that. I mean, I remember diving somewhere like Egypt 10 years ago, and it was pristine. If you go there now, there's an awful lot of plastic floating around. It's not as pristine as it used to be, and so probably very common throughout the world.
Are you going to have a web page or something that we can follow while you're off adventuring and see what you're up to and what you're finding?
Well, there's an Instagram account. I'm sure I'll put things on there when connectivity allows. I mean, I have a website which is kind of down at the moment and being revamped, so kind of more focused on the boat itself. So if anyone's interested on how we did that and what's how it's put together and what features it has, that will be there. But I'll make sure you've got a link for it when it's done. Yeah,
thanks, Tom. And you're going to be back down very soon, we hope.
As things open up, we're allowed to travel a bit more and stay. I'm quite keen to come and spend a few nights on the boat to start with, and we'll just kind of start settling into that. And then, obviously once we're in the water, and then there's going to be a whole series of sea trials and going out for day sails and all of that stuff. So as soon as COVID permits us to do that, we'll be down as well. At the earliest possible opportunity, basically.
I can imagine. Yes, yeah. Desperate to get down and start enjoying your boat. It's a pity this last year. Actually, I was thinking about you building your land tender van thing, and actually the boatyard would have been a perfect place for you to tinker around with that.
All the skills, all the kit, quite useful. No, instead I was there, with a kind of hammer and a chisel, stripping it all out myself with a that was quite interesting, especially when I was pulling out the kind of mouse infested fibre foundation. That was a real high point. Well, of course, I mean, and then doing it yourself and kind of stripping it out and rebuilding it, I've made it as accessible as it needs to be, so that it can carry around the off-roader that I was talking about before. In fact, I think that as we're sailing around in different parts of the world, it's not not completely impossible to ship a camper van to wherever you're going to be, so that you disembark and then head off into the interior for a sort of safari style adventure or something like that, and then before you come back to your to your mooring or whatever. But we'll see how that pans out.
And actually that's where it's beneficial that you've done the work yourself, because more than likely, if anything breaks down on it in the middle of nowhere, you'll be the one needing to fix it. So having that knowledge already.
Well, I mean, and also what we did is as I'm sure you know, I spoke to the guys about things like how to put in the right electrical system. So what we've done is taken the design of what's on the boat and then made it much smaller in scale, and then put it into the van. So it's the same stuff, it's the same components. So that's quite useful in terms of a bit of crossover for troubleshooting and the like, because there's only one real system to learn. It's just a slightly different size on the boat or on the van. But yeah, the guys are very helpful with that.
Great, brilliant. Well, it sounds like you've got it all well planned out, Tom. Now we just need to see it actually in action.
Right, okay. So no pressure there.
No.
Well, all I want is a good time to relax my mind. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. All I need is a sweet dream to return to me. 4 in the morning, I'm all for you. Wouldn't it be cool to just be cool, laying it down like you always do, walking me over like they want you to? Wouldn't it